local law enforcement agencies joining a nationwide crackdown on illegal immigration has doubled since President Trump took office. Counties that are signed up for the 287G program work with federal customs officials in reporting undocumented immigrants. David Begnaud traveled to Gwinnett County in Georgia to see how it works.
Just keep your hands still.
With immigration with the jail, okay?
We're inside the perimeter of the Gwinnett County Jail. There's about 2,400 inmates here. We're probably 30 minutes north of downtown Atlanta. Federal immigration officials point to Georgia as being a model state when it comes to successfully cracking down on illegal immigration. So we've come to see how it's working. 6 counties in Georgia have joined the federal 287G program. It deputizes local law enforcement to act as ICE agents. The number of law enforcement agencies participating in this program has tripled since President Trump took office. So this 287G means no matter how minor your crime is or how major it is, if you're in the country illegally, we're going to hold you for ICE.
Under the Trump administration right now, we're going by all law immigration laws.
Gotcha.
So you come in for jaywalking. We find out that you're illegal. We hand you over to ICE. Now, we work for ICE.
Right.
We do not deport anybody.
Diaz Lopez?
We get you into ICE's system. We get you into ICE's custody.
Right.
You go through the immigration process.
Do you want an interpreter? You got to step here?
Just north of Atlanta, Gwinnett County accounted for 20% of all 287G encounters last year. That is by far the most nationally.
So you verify that you do not have any valid documentation to legally be here in the United States?
27-year-old Fermin Diaz Lopez was driving to his plumbing job when he was pulled over by police because his passenger was not wearing a seatbelt. He was arrested for driving without a license. How long have you been in the U.S.?
11 years.
Have you ever been deported before?
No.
No. So this would be your first time?
It's first time.
How are you feeling right now?
I feel so bad. I'm so scared. I'm not like to go in my country. This is my family here. My wife, she's pregnant. I feel so bad for that.
Unlike Diaz Lopez, 70% of those deported by ICE from this jail have prior criminal records, such as Javier Cuatro, who has multiple felonies and deportations. I heard that you said you want to be deported. You want to go back.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't have a chance. You don't have nothing.
Moments later, ICE arrived to pick up Diaz Lopez, Cuatro, and 2 other inmates.
Good.
They were taken to a detention center in Atlanta for possible deportation. Nationwide, 78 local law enforcement agencies across 20 states participate in the 287G program, through which ICE deported close to 6,000 illegal immigrants last year. 653 alone came from Gwinnett County.
If you're in a country illegally, the least you can do is obey that country's laws.
Gwinnett County Sheriff Butch Conway signed the county up for the program in 2009. What do you say to the folks who say it's just an excuse to profile?
No, if they don't commit a crime and come to Gwinnett County Jail, then we'll never have any contact with them.
California and so-called sanctuary cities ban programs like 287G.
Unfortunately, we are one of the worst states to be an undocumented individual.
Well, thank you so much for doing.
Local activist Aisha Yaqub helped to block the statewide implementation in Georgia earlier this year.
Our communities are targeted based on what they look like. Police officers pulling people over for something as simple as a broken taillight or driving without a license.
Is it profiling, or is that them just doing their job?
So just the thought of dealing with someone who is an undocumented person gives them a little bit extra push to maybe take them to the jail and see what they could do.
What do you say to the critics who say, look, most of the people you're arresting and sending over to ICE are nonviolent offenders?
Well, they're wrong. I've known illegal aliens personally for many years that work in the community, live in the community. They're great people, but they're here illegally. If they're going to be here illegally, you drive, you're taking a chance.
And David Begnaud joins me now to talk about his report. David, what stood out to you most as you spent time at the detention center speaking with people there?
that really nothing triggered the ICE agents within the jail to step in until you walked in, Errol, and you told them, I'm from a country other than the U.S. That's all it took. And the moment that happened, that triggered the process where they went and got the deputies who act as ICE agents to come and say, hey, Errol, let me take you into another room. Let me ask you some questions about where you're from. Right?
How you got here.
Yeah, how you got. Tell me your story.
Now, in your report, you also mentioned that Gwinnett County accounts for about 20% of encounters under this 287G program. Right. What are other issues that it raises? Well, you got the critics who say, listen, you are going out and you're profiling. So one of the men in the piece was pulled over because one of his passengers wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Right? So you've got the critics who say, okay, now wait a minute. He wasn't doing anything wrong as a driver. His passenger was, so you pulled him over. The critics would say because he looked like he was in the country illegally. Now, come to find out, the driver was driving without a license. That's a crime. In some places, you're not going to go to jail for that. But as the sheriff said, you drive without a license here in my county and you're coming to my jail. The bottom line is, look, these programs operate under the authority of the sheriff. The sheriffs have so much power. Right.
And so when the sheriff says, hey, Mr. Federal Government, I want to cooperate with you. We're going to bring 287G into my program. That's all they need. Into my county. That's all they need. A lot of sheriffs around the country have said, I don't want anything to do with your 287G program. However, the number of participants in the program have more than tripled since President Trump took office. And we should note this is happening at a time of increased criticism of those in the country illegally, the Trump administration's policy, hardline, some would say, policy toward them. But Sheriff Butch, for example, signed up during the Obama administration. He signed up back in 2009. Correct. And so he said, hey, listen, I didn't do this just because Trump came into office. I did this because we've got a problem with people in this country illegally being in my county, and I wanted to address it. And he puts a period there. Now, you mentioned in the report as well that 70% of these detainees who were deported from the county jail had criminal records. So what does that say about what's happening? Look, the sheriff uses it as an excuse and says, hey, listen, the people I'm sending out, regardless of what their color is, regardless of how they look, they were breaking the law and I got rid of them. Right? So he's saying, you know, call me what you want, they were breaking the law. And that's where he sort of drops it. But you have other folks who say there are also a lot of people who are not, you know, they're driving around with a tail light. You and I might get a ticket for a tail light, or they forgot a license at home, and you and I wouldn't go to jail for having a license. I mean, that's the pushback on this, right? But again, as journalists, we're not here to take a side. We just wanted to go to the jail and embed, right? Like we spent an entire day there. And it was cold. It was kind of isolating. It was, I mean, I've never been to jail before, right? Have you? No. Right? So it was interesting to watch him sit in there. And it was fascinating to listen to one of the guys say, I want him to deport me. I said, you want to be deported? He said, yeah, because he said this process and this, you know, trying to run from them all the time and look over my shoulder, he said, I'm done with it. And I said, what about your family? He said, I don't know. And I think he was leaving behind like a wife and a few kids. And sure enough, he got deported. So many interesting stories in this report. Really eye-opening stuff. David Begnaud, thanks for coming in. Great to see you. Yeah, good to have you in New York.